r/Nosleep. Posted by TPSavage. I keep finding human teeth in my apartment, I found out who's leaving them. Part 2. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, swerving in and out of the different lanes like a madman. Horns sounded up angrily all around me, but I barely heard them. Getting ticketed was the least of my concerns. How much of a head start did I have on the psycho coming for Luca? Was he already there, closing in on her, blade in hand? I put the awful questions in a box and pushed them to the back of my mind. I turned a corner and finally caught sight of the bar where she worked, its tacky neon lights flashing in the night. I screeched to a halt in the packed parking lot, nearly scraping the truck beside me. Throwing open the thick wooden door of the building, I scanned the roiling mass of humanity for any sign of my big sister. It was a Saturday night and the bar was packed with bodies, screaming, dancing, and laughing. I pushed my way to the back where I found a short redhead wiping off a shot glass from behind the counter. Shouting over the drone of people, I asked, "Is Luca here?" The girl gave me a skeptical look, probably put off by my frenzied, scattered appearance. I couldn't blame her. "Who's asking?" "I'm her brother. It's urgent." I saw her suspicion give way to concern. "I haven't seen her. She never showed up to her shift." It was like a punch in the stomach. I whipped out my phone and frantically started dialing 911. The cops were there in minutes, although it felt like an eternity to me. By the time they'd arrived, I'd chewed my nail so far down it drew blood. The same gravelly-voiced detective from earlier stood in front of me, flanked on both sides by stone-faced police officers. I relayed everything that had happened, the break-in, the man, the twisted present he'd given me. I tried watching his face to gauge his reaction, but his expression is unreadable. I had just finished when another officer walked up from the parking lot, turning to the detective. "We just found her car, sir. No sign of where she may have gone." Something grim seemed to pass between the two men, and in one terrible instant, I realized my sister may not be coming back. About a half hour later, I was squinting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station. I sat across from the detective whose name I now knew was Vince Severson and stared at the photos he'd laid out for me. I scanned each picture, looking for the man who'd attacked me. I tried to conjure an image, but his face eluded me. I was on the verge of losing all hope of finding him when I revealed the last page. When I saw the man's sallow cheeks and sunken eyes, my brain immediately lit up with recognition. For a moment, I was in the bathroom again, backed against the wall, staring into the man's vacant eyes. I took a deep breath and said, "That's him. He's the one who broke in." Severson narrowed his eyes. "And you're sure? We don't want you throwing an innocent guy under the bus." I looked at the image again and shuddered. "Yeah, that's definitely him." "Who is he?" He smiled, showing 22 perfectly white teeth. "You know I can tell you that, right? It's an ongoing investigation." "What if I recognize the name? It might spark a memory." I looked at him pleadingly. I was grasping at straws and we both knew it. "Sorry, son. No can do." I was going to try again when his phone began vibrating. "Excuse me 1 minute." Severson listened intently for a few minutes, bushy eyebrows furrowed. He scribbled a few things down on a legal pad and then turned to me. "Sorry bud, I'll be right back. You stay put." And then he was gone, shutting the door quietly behind him. A minute went by. 2 minutes. I looked at the desk and suddenly realized something. There was no window on the door. I could look at those papers and no one would ever know. I wanted so desperately to put a name to the face of the man who'd terrorized my family for so long. I jumped up and began rifling through the papers, taking care to leave everything back where I'd found it. I flipped through the pages of the legal pad Severson had been writing on. It seemed like a list of the evidence they'd found at Luca's house. Size 15 boot print. Approx. 10 3-inches black hairs. Trace amounts of animal fur? Severson had underlined and question marked that last item, apparently not knowing what to make of it. I didn't either. Luca didn't have any pets. Where would the fur have come from? I kept looking until I found a document with all the faces I'd seen earlier, as well as their names underneath. A few seconds of quick scanning and bingo. Ben McLaren. I said the name aloud to myself, committing it to memory. Footsteps. Damn, I thought. I put everything back in its place and hopped in my seat just in time for Severson to return. The whole thing couldn't have taken longer than 3 minutes. "Everything okay? You look a little nervous." I smiled at him. "Everything's fine. Too restless to sleep, I spent that night finding everything I could about Ben McLaren. Severson had promised to do everything he could to find Luca, but I didn't trust him for a second. Law enforcement had spouted that exact same line 9 years ago, but still never found Julie. I'd be damned if I was going to trust them to find Luca. After a few quick searches, I found an article detailing the turbulent life of Ben McLaren. He'd been institutionalized at the Wetmeyer State Hospital after a psychotic episode that ended with the murder of his mother. However, despite this, he'd been recently discharged for his excellent recovery. Couldn't have been that excellent, I thought. It seemed to like he'd reverted back to his old self the second he stepped foot out of the door. I looked for more information on the murder of his mother, but the article was sparse on details. Further searches were similarly useless. I put my head in my hands. All the momentum I'd been building up was beginning to evaporate. In one last-ditch attempt to get more information, I emailed the author of the original article, explaining that I thought Ben might be killing again. I glanced out the window only to find the sun peeking up from behind the horizon. It was already dawn. I'd been awake nearly 24 hours. I put my head down on the computer desk, not having the strength to walk to my bed. I awoke at around noon the next day to the ding of my phone. To my surprise, Lowndes had already responded, saying he'd be happy to meet with me. A few hours later, I found myself at Mel's Diner, sitting across from a tall spindly man about my age, mid-20s. He wore thick glasses and a blonde bun that just oozed millennial. "So, you really think McLaren's killing again?" I nodded quickly. "Does that surprise you?" "Not at all," he said coolly. "I just figured he'd be able to wait a year at least." "How could they let someone like that out so soon?" I asked. Trent shrugged. "It's more common than you think. The violence was solely based on his delusions. The psychiatrists at Wetmeyer must have figured that he's perfectly safe as long as he takes his medication. And if he decides not to?" He gave me a grave look. "Then situations like this happen. You said in your email you believe he's taken your sister?" I nodded. "I want to see if there are any parallels to his previous murder. What happened to his mom? I can't find any information on it." He leaned in. "The police tried their best to keep it on the low. Didn't want to cause a scare." "Oh," I said, disappointed. "So you don't know?" He flashed me a smile. "I said they tried to keep it low, but I have my ways. One thing you need to know about Mrs. McLaren is that she was mean. Real mean. Ben started showing symptoms of schizophrenia early, around 15 or 16. Whenever she caught him talking to people who weren't there, she'd beat him. And she constantly berated him, calling him psycho and retard. Now you'd think he'd want to get as far as possible from her, but not at all. He never moved out, lived with her until he was about 32. "What happened?" I asked, already fearing the answer. "Well, they screamed at each other all the time, but one day it was particularly bad. This argument must have been the one that sent him over the edge because he just snapped." Trent seemed to hesitate, not liking what came next. He blinded her with his fingers, jabbing his thumbs in the sockets. Then he cut out her tongue with a kitchen knife in her ears. Trent began fumbling over the words awkwardly. He finally settled on making a stabbing motion and saying, "Pencils." I shuddered. Was this what was in store for Luca? Had it already happened? God, that's awful. Why would he do something like that? He stared at his coffee. Did he do it right there in the house? Trent shook his head. "No one knows where he did it. We just know where we found the body." He furrowed his brow, remembering something. "They found animal hair on it." There it was again. Just like on Detective Severson's list. "What kind?" I asked. "Don't know. Nothing from around here though. Not a bear or a wolf or anything like that." I mulled over everything I'd heard so far, trying to make the pieces fit. What he'd done to his mother is more or less what he'd done to Julie, only minus the tools. "It's like he's disarming them," I said. "He blinds and deafens them so they can't judge him, and he removes their teeth, or tongue, so that they can't make fun of him." Trent was nodding slowly. Almost like the 3 wise monkeys. I gave him a questioning look. "You know, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil." My eyes lit up. Exactly like that. I felt so close. Maybe if I got inside McLaren's head, I could figure out how to find him. I thought back to the animal hair found at both crime scenes. Then I had an idea that made me nearly drop my coffee. "Trent," I said. "Just a hunch, but did McLaren work at the zoo?" Trent put a hand to his chin, seemingly searching his internal database. "You know, actually he did. It was that old one that closed down a few." He trailed off, coming to the same conclusion as me. He's obsessed with the three wise monkeys, right? There's no better place to kill in their honor than the monkey habitat, he finished. Alright, let's let the police know. But I was already pulling my coat on. He called out to me as I made a break for the door. Where are you going? To get my sister.